The attack came without warning, pinning an entire SEAL team at the Coronado training range. "Give me your rifle," said the quiet maintenance girl, her voice steady under the thunder of gunfire. "You can't be serious." The wounded marksman groaned. "Trust me," she answered. What happened next would change everything. Meet Maya Lin, 26 years old. Dark hair tied back in a plain ponytail. Brown eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing. For 2 years, she had worked as a range maintenance specialist at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, home to the Navy SEAL training pipeline. Every morning at 0500 she arrived in silence, cleaning shooting lanes, patching targets, resetting steel, and logging every rifle and optic before the operators began their drills. To the SEALs who moved through the kill houses and sniper pits each day, Maya was almost invisible. Just another pair of coveralls sweeping up brass, hauling plywood silhouettes, and fixing jammed target rails. What they didn't know was that Maya carried the bloodline of one of the most formidable snipers the Army had ever fielded. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Daniel Chen, had been a Green Beret sniper in Vietnam, a name whispered in Special Forces circles for decades. His confirmed kills were less important than his reputation a ghost in the tree lines, a man who turned patience and math into weapons deadlier than any rifle. Maya had grown up on Fenn's ranch in rural Montana, while other children spent weekends playing sports. She spent hers learning how to breathe between heartbeats, how to read wind across open plains, how to calculate bullet drop with nothing but a notebook and a steady hand. "Little bird," her grandfather called her, watching her prone in the grass, holding her breath until the world went still. A true sniper isn't just someone who shoots straight. A true sniper is someone who can vanish, think like the enemy, and strike when least expected. The rifle is just a tool. Your mind is the real weapon. Fenn had been forced into retirement after shrapnel tore into his shooting arm on a classified mission in Cambodia. But he poured every ounce of his skill into his granddaughter, knowing the military establishment would never let a woman prove what most men could not. By the time Maya was 18, she could outshoot veterans twice her age, but when she tried to enlist, doors closed, policies, biases, and politics buried her abilities under paperwork. She took the only role available maintenance staff at a range where her skills were never supposed to matter. Until today, as mortar blasts shook the ground and SEALs scrambled for cover. Maya didn't panic. She didn't freeze. She simply looked up at the tower, at the rifle she knew better than anyone, and realized the moment her grandfather had prepared her for had finally arrived. You're watching this story from the very beginning. Don't miss what happens next. Hit subscribe now and stay with us for more incredible military stories. The smoke from the first mortar round still hung over the range when Commander Aaron Keller sprinted to cover. He had overseen dozens of live-fire exercises, but this was no drill. The incoming fire was coordinated, accurate, and merciless, whoever the attackers were. They knew exactly how to pin down a SEAL platoon. Keller shouted orders, moving with the sharp authority that had carried him through 15 years of combat tours. His men responded instinctively, forming firing lines, dragging the wounded, returning fire in controlled bursts. Yet even Keller felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. They were outnumbered, outpositioned, and their designated marksman, Chief Gunner's mate Eli Rogers, was bleeding out beside a shattered barricade. That was when Maya Lin appeared, moving through smoke and chaos with unnerving calm. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be anything more than the girl who reset steel plates and swept brass at dawn. And yet, she crouched beside Rogers as if she belonged, her hands moving with the familiarity of someone who had patched wounds and checked rifles 100 times before. Keller's instinct was to push her back into safety, but something about her eyes stopped him. They weren't panicked. They weren't even wide with shock. They were calculating, measuring angles, studying terrain the way only a sniper would. Rogers groaned, clutching his side. His rifle, the MK-11, lay across his lap, still locked and ready. Maya's hand brushed against it. Steady as stone. You can't possibly. Keller started. Commander. She cut him off, her voice low but certain. If you want this team alive, put me in the tower. The audacity of the words stunned him. This was a maintenance worker, speaking as if she had the authority to change the course of a firefight. But the tone in her voice wasn't reckless. It carried the same cadence he'd heard in combat veterans who had stared death in the face and refused to blink. You think you can do better than my marksman? Keller demanded. Maya didn't flinch. I don't think. I know. The surrounding gunfire cracked like whips, echoing against concrete. One of his men went down hard, pulled back by teammates dragging him behind cover. Keller felt his jaw tighten. Every instinct in him screamed against this insanity, against handing a precision weapon to someone with no record, no uniform, no official right to even hold it. But in that split second, he remembered the alternative: more men bleeding out, an enemy closing in, a quick reaction force still 15 minutes away. He shoved the rifle into her hands. Fine, you've got one chance. Maya accepted the weapon with the quiet reverence of someone reuniting with an old friend. She checked the scope, adjusted the bipod, and slung the headset over her ears. Not a wasted motion, not a tremor of doubt. Keller caught himself staring, a question hammering at the back of his mind. Who the hell is this girl? The battlefield descended into chaos. Mortars shook the ground in dull, punishing thuds, while bursts of automatic fire stitched across the range. Concrete shattered, dust filled the air, and voices crackled over radios with clipped desperation. SEALs were trained for worst-case scenarios, but not for being ambushed on their own soil. In the middle of a training run, Maya Lin dropped low, clutching the MK-11 as if it had been forged for her hands. Around her, operators shouted, firing in bursts that barely held the enemy at bay. Commander Aaron Keller barked orders, shifting men into defensive arcs. But the truth was plain: they were pinned, and their perimeter was shrinking by the second. Maya didn't waste time. She slung the rifle, grabbed a spotting scope from the wounded Rogers, and started crawling. Dust caked her uniform. Shrapnel hissed into the dirt around her. But she moved with unnerving purpose, slow, steady, deliberate, the kind of movement that screamed of hours spent low to the ground. Learning patience from someone who knew the cost of a wrong step. Where the hell is she going? One SEAL shouted. Keller watched her slide behind a berm, then angled toward the skeletal tower that loomed over the range. It was suicide to climb under fire, but Keller couldn't look away. Every move she made echoed something he'd seen before in combat veterans: the refusal to hesitate when hesitation meant death. A ricochet sparked off the ladder as she began to climb. Bullets sliced the air around her. Still, she ascended rung by rung, body pressed flat against steel, her grip unshaken. At the top, she crawled onto the platform and set the rifle down as if she had rehearsed this exact motion 1,000 times. From below, Keller keyed his radio. Lin, if you're up there, don't miss. No answer came back. She was already dialing the scope, adjusting the windage, breathing in through her nose, out through her lips. The rest of the world dissolved into angles and numbers, just as her grandfather had drilled into her. Through the glass, she saw them enemy shooters moving across the ridgeline, one setting up a belt fed, another directing fire with hand signals. They thought the tower was unmanned, just another structure to be ignored in the chaos. Maya's crosshairs settled. Her finger rested against the trigger. She exhaled, long and slow, until her heartbeat and the reticle aligned. The first shot cracked, clean and sharp. A machine gunner dropped mid-motion, his weapon clattering uselessly to the dirt. Keller's head snapped toward the impact. That's her, he muttered. The second shot came 8 seconds later, another body collapsing before the team even realized they were exposed. Enemy fire stuttered, then faltered. The pressure eased not much, but enough for Keller's men to shift positions and stabilize the line. Who the hell is this girl? one SEAL whispered, reloading in disbelief. From her perch, Maya adjusted elevation, rolled her shoulder, and fired again. The round cut down a spotter mid-command, silencing the enemy's coordination. Panic rippled through their ranks. Keller couldn't suppress the mix of shock and awe spreading through him. The invisible maintenance worker, the woman no one noticed for 2 years, was rewriting the battle in real time. Yet even as the tide shifted, Maya's expression didn't change. Her eyes stayed locked through the scope, her breathing steady. This wasn't luck. It wasn't adrenaline. This was training decades old, passed down from Chen, living now in his granddaughter's steady hands. The realization struck Keller like a blow. This wasn't just survival. This was the emergence of someone his command had overlooked, someone whose presence they had dismissed, until the bullets forced them to see her, and she was just getting started. The range had become a war zone. Smoke drifted low, broken only by the staccato rhythm of rifle fire and the thump of mortars in the distance. For every enemy shooter that went down, 2 more seemed to appear, pressing hard to break the SEAL perimeter. But now, high in the tower, Maya Lin was in her element. She lay flat, cheek welded to the MK-11 stock, her body aligned in a perfect line of bone and steel. Each inhale stretched time. Each exhale sharpened it into a blade. Below, Commander Aaron Keller barked orders and moved his men into tighter formation, but his eyes kept flicking upward, toward the lone figure who had claimed the high ground. Maya adjusted her scope. Wind 2 knots left to right, distance 600 meters. Target a sniper settling behind rubble. Glass already glinting as he tried to draw a bead on Keller himself. Her fingers squeezed. The enemy's rifle discharged a split second too late, the round hissing past Keller's shoulder harmlessly. The shooter never rose again. "Sniper down," a SEAL shouted. Disbelief and relief tangled in his voice. Keller didn't respond. He was watching her work. Maya shifted, rolled her shoulder, chambered another round. Through the scope she caught movement, a squad of 3 advancing with coordinated bursts, one laying suppressive fire while the others flanked. Rookie mistakes to some, but not to her. She saw the geometry of death before it unfolded. 1 shot, the suppressor crumpled. 2, a flank collapsed mid-sprint. 3, the last froze, staring at his fallen comrades. Before Maya's 3rd round ended his hesitation. Holy hell. Rogers groaned from the ground, pale but conscious enough to see his own rifle being wielded like an artist's brush. The SEALs, hardened men who rarely voiced awe, exchanged glances as if witnessing something they couldn't name. It wasn't just accuracy, it was inevitability. Maya didn't hunt targets, she erased them. Up in the tower, she paused long enough to switch frequencies on the radio headset. Her voice came across calm, clipped, professional. "Enemy positions collapsing on your 9 o'clock. Push right. Tighten your arc. You'll have cover in 60 seconds. Keller froze at the sound. That wasn't the voice of a civilian maintenance worker. That was the voice of someone who had studied doctrine, learned the language of command, and earned it the hard way. "Copy," he said, almost out of instinct. His men shifted accordingly, and just as Maya predicted, fire slackened on the right flank as she picked off 2 more shooters trying to reposition. Confidence surged through the platoon. For the first time since the ambush began, momentum tilted in their favor. Still, Maya didn't allow triumph into her breathing. She rotated, lined up another shot, and waited. Patience. Her grandfather had taught her. Killed more enemies than speed ever could, and patience was what she had in endless supply. Through the scope, she caught sight of a heavy machine gun being dragged into position. If it opened fire, half the team would be cut down before they could adjust. She slowed her pulse, watched the loader's hands, listened to the imagined rhythm of the belt feeding through. And then, one squeeze. The round cut through the gunner's visor, dropping him instantly. The loader scrambled, panic-stricken, before a second shot folded him beside the weapon. The roar of the battlefield seemed to dull in that instant, for the first time. The attackers hesitated. Keller exhaled hard, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. His men pressed forward, taking ground, confidence restored by the invisible guardian above them. Down below, amidst the dust and blood, a truth crystallized in Keller's mind. The quiet girl who mopped floors and patched target rails had just saved his entire command. And she wasn't done yet, because the question now wasn't whether Maya Lin could fight. It was how long the Navy could ignore what she had just become. The battlefield finally fell silent. Spent casings littered the ground. Smoke drifted in ragged curtains, and the echoes of gunfire faded into the California wind. For the SEAL team at Coronado, survival felt unreal. Minutes earlier, they had been staring at certain death. Now, against every calculation, they were alive. At the heart of it all stood Maya Lin, lowering the Mk-11 with the calm finality of someone who had just finished a day's work. Her breathing was steady, her eyes clear. Around her, hardened operators' men who had mocked or ignored her for 2 years stared in a silence heavy with respect they didn't yet know how to express. Commander Aaron Keller stepped forward, dust streaking his uniform, disbelief written across his face. For the first time, the unflappable SEAL officer seemed at a loss for words. He had witnessed her transform the impossible into survival, precision into salvation. "Who taught you?" he asked quietly. Maya's answer was simple. "My grandfather, Master Sergeant Daniel Chen." The name landed like a stone in still water. Even Keller had heard its stories whispered of a ghost sniper in Vietnam, a man who bent math and patience into weapons sharper than any blade. Suddenly, the impossible made sense. Over the following hours, the quick reaction force swept the range, securing what remained of the attackers. Reports would be written, debriefings held, and bureaucrats would scramble to explain how a civilian maintenance worker had outshot half the Navy. But none of that mattered in the dust-filled quiet of the present moment. Keller, a man shaped by years of combat and by the unyielding traditions of command, looked at Maya and saw what he had missed all along: talent buried by bias, brilliance dismissed because it didn't fit the mold. Within weeks, the Navy fast-tracked an unprecedented decision. Maya Lin was offered a direct commission, not just as recognition, but as necessity. Her knowledge, her lineage, and her performance under fire made her too valuable to ignore. Months later, she stood at the front of a classroom at Coronado, wearing officers' bars on her shoulders, teaching advanced marksmanship to the very operators who once brushed past her with barely a glance. Her voice carried steady across the range, calm, precise, patient, the voice of a sniper, the voice of a teacher. And though medals and titles would follow, Maya never chased them. Her grandfather's lesson stayed etched in her memory. A rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is the mind that wields it. The SEALs never forgot the day she saved them, and the Navy never again underestimated the quiet girl who had been invisible until the moment the world needed her most. Because greatness doesn't always announce itself with rank or reputation. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment when preparation and opportunity collide. Maya Lin had been overlooked. She would never be overlooked again.